My cousin accused me of sleeping with his bride on their wedding day. My family cut me off without evidence. But when 5 years later they discovered it was all a lie and came begging, I turned my back and left them broken. I'm 32 years old. I work in software development in Seattle, and until about a month ago I was living pretty peacefully, thinking I'd left the worst period of my life behind. But turns out the past always finds a way to knock on your door, literally. And now I need to tell this story because honestly, I don't know what to do with everything I'm feeling. I guess I should start at the beginning. I mean, the day my entire life went to shit in a matter of seconds. It was June 2019. I was 27 years old and living in a small town outside Portland. You know, one of those places where everyone knows everyone and gossip flies faster than anything else. I worked at the local bank as an analyst. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I lived in a decent apartment near downtown. My family had always been close, or so I thought. My parents lived 10 minutes away, my brother Ryan 5 minutes away, and my younger sister Lauren was finishing college. We had Sunday family dinners, birthdays, summer barbecues, all that perfect American family vibe you see in movies. My cousin Dylan was like my brother. We grew up together. We'd go fishing, play video games. Our whole lives we were super close. When he met Stephanie in 2017, I was one of the first to meet her, and I thought she was great from the start. She was smart, funny, worked as an elementary school teacher, and you could tell she really loved Dylan. When he asked me to be one of his groomsmen at the wedding, obviously I said yes without thinking twice. The wedding was planned for June 15, 2019. They were getting married at the town church, and then there was a reception at a beautiful place on the outskirts with a view of some mountains. Everything was perfect. I mean, Stephanie had spent months planning every detail. The morning of the wedding, I was nervous about my speech. Honestly, because I've never been good at public speaking, but I wanted to say something nice for Dylan. I woke up early, got dressed in the suit. We'd all rented for the groomsmen, a dark gray that made us look like Secret Service, but whatever, and arrived at the church around 10 inches the morning to help with the last details. Connor, Dylan's best friend from college, was already there organizing the ushers and everything looked good. I remember thinking, this is going to be an amazing day. Dylan arrived around 11. He was super nervous but happy, you know, with that groom energy of someone about to marry the love of his life. We were joking around in the room where the groom gets ready, took some photos, and everything was going perfectly. Guests started arriving around 11:30. The church was filling up. There were like 200 people invited, and it seemed like most were going to come. I was standing outside the church greeting some family members when I saw Dylan running out toward the parking lot, and I thought maybe he'd forgotten something in the car. But then I heard shouting, and when I turned around, Dylan was running toward me with a face I'd never seen on him, like pure fury. And before I could say what's up, he threw a punch directly at my face that knocked me to the ground. I was lying there, confused, with my nose bleeding everywhere, staining the white shirt of my suit, and Dylan was on top of me screaming things I couldn't process. Connor and Ryan had to pull him off because he was going to keep hitting me, and all I could think was, what the hell is happening? People came running out of the church. My parents were there, Stephanie's parents. Basically all the guests witnessed my cousin attack me without any clear explanation. Someone called the police, obviously, because this was happening literally in front of a church full of people dressed in formal wear. When I managed to stand up and clean off some of the blood, Dylan was screaming at me that I was a traitor, that how could I do that to him, that he hated me and never wanted to see me again. I was completely lost. Like, do what to him? What the hell is he talking about? Turns out someone had told Dylan that same morning, literally hours before his wedding, that Stephanie and I had been having an affair for months, that we'd been seen together in compromising situations, that we were lovers, that basically she loved me and not him, a whole completely fabricated story, but Dylan swallowed it without questioning it for a second. The wedding obviously was canceled right there. Stephanie arrived half an hour later not knowing what was happening, and when she found out about the accusation she became hysterical, denying everything. But nobody believed her either. The following days were, without exaggerating, hell on earth. My parents came to my apartment that same night, demanding I tell them the truth, that I confess, that I at least have the decency to admit what I'd done. I swore to them 1,000 times that absolutely nothing had happened between Stephanie and me, that I hadn't even been alone with her for more than 2 minutes in my entire life, that this was total insanity. But my dad just looked at me with this disappointment in his eyes that I'll never forget. And my mom was crying, saying, how could I destroy Dylan's life like that? That she hadn't raised me to be that kind of person. I asked them to tell me who had made the accusation, where the evidence was, photos, messages, whatever, because I knew nothing existed, because nothing had happened. But nobody wanted to tell me anything. They just repeated that there were witnesses, that Dylan had proof, that it was obvious, and to stop lying. My brother Ryan told me not to talk to him again, that I was an embarrassment to the family. Lauren, my little sister who had always been my favorite, sent me a message saying she hated me and wished I wasn't her brother. The thing is, it wasn't just my family. In a small town like that, news flies. And by the following Monday, literally everyone knew that Isaac had ruined his cousin's wedding by being a womanizer with the bride. I went to work on Monday and people looked at me weird. They whispered when I passed. My boss called me into his office and told me that maybe it would be better if I took a few days off while things calmed down. I'd go to the supermarket and people would point at me. One lady even yelled at me that I was a disgrace in the middle of the cereal aisle. Stephanie had it worse than me. Honestly, her parents were super religious, the kind that go to church 3 times a week, and they literally kicked her out of their house. They threw all her things into the street, like all her belongings in trash bags in the front yard, and told her they never wanted to see her again, that she'd brought shame to the family, and that to them, she was dead. She tried to talk to me several times those first weeks, I think to see if I had any idea what the hell had happened. But every time people saw us together, they assumed it was proof that we were having the affair. So, eventually, we stopped trying. I spent 2 months in that town feeling like a criminal, going to work where nobody talked to me, returning to my apartment where I had nobody, no family, no friends, because everyone had turned their backs on me based on a rumor that nobody could prove. I tried calling Dylan like 1,000 times. I sent him emails, messages, tried to talk to Connor so he could tell me what supposedly had happened, but nobody responded. It was like I'd ceased to exist for everyone who'd ever mattered to me. In August 2019, I made the decision to get out. I couldn't keep living like that. Every day was torture, and I didn't see how things could get better. I quit my job, looked for another one in Seattle, like 4 hours away, found an apartment in an area where I didn't know anyone, and basically fled. Stephanie did the same. As I found out later, she went to Chicago to live with a cousin. We both basically ripped up our lives by the roots and started from scratch in cities where nobody knew us and nobody judged us for something we never did. Seattle was weird at first, being in a big city without knowing anyone, no family, no history. I got a job at a tech startup. Nothing very important at first, but it was something. I lived in a small studio in Capitol Hill. I'd walk to work, come home, watch Netflix, sleep, and repeat. I didn't tell anyone about my past. If someone asked why I'd moved to Seattle, I'd just say I wanted a change of scenery, that the small town wasn't for me. Nobody questioned much. But the truth is, I was depressed, like really bad. I didn't sleep well. I had nightmares about the wedding, about the moment Dylan hit me, about my parents' faces telling me I was a disappointment. I lost like 15 pounds because I didn't feel like eating, and there were moments where I thought about dark things I prefer not to detail. What saved me, I think, was that my boss at the startup noticed I wasn't doing well and recommended a therapist. I started going in January 2020, right before the world went to shit with the pandemic, and that helped me process everything, to understand that I hadn't done anything wrong and that the guilt wasn't mine. The pandemic was shit for everyone, obviously, but for me, in a way, it was almost a relief because now everyone was isolated, nobody could go out, so I didn't feel so abnormal being alone. I worked from home, did Zoom meetings, ordered food, and basically existed in a bubble that was depressing but manageable. During that time, Stephanie and I reconnected a bit. She sent me a Facebook message around May 2020 asking how I was, and we started talking from time to time. Neither of us had answers about what had happened, but there was something comforting about talking to the only other person in the world who completely understood what we'd lived through. Things started getting better in the summer of 2021. COVID restrictions were relaxing, people were going out again, and I felt like I was finally coming out of that black hole I'd been in. A coworker threw a barbecue at his house in July, and that's where I met Megan. She was a friend of my coworker's girlfriend, worked in marketing for an outdoor gear company, and literally the moment I saw her, I thought, okay, this girl is beautiful. She had shoulder-length brown hair, freckles on her nose, and this smile that instantly made you feel comfortable. We talked all night at that barbecue, about all kinds of random things, movies, music, places we wanted to travel, and I didn't feel even once that pressure of having to explain my past or pretend to be someone I wasn't. She was funny, smart, and there was something about the way she looked at me that made me feel, I don't know, like I was worth something. You know what I mean? I asked for her number before leaving, and we started going out about 2 weeks later. The first months with Megan were amazing. I felt like a normal human again. We'd go walking in Discovery Park, try new restaurants, watch movies at her apartment, and it was all very easy and natural. But there was a part of me that knew eventually I'd have to tell her about my past, about why I'd really moved to Seattle, and I was terrified thinking that when I did, she was going to run away. I told her around October 2021, we'd been dating for 3 months and things were getting serious. We were at my apartment, we'd made pasta for dinner, and she asked me something casual about my family, and I just broke. I told her everything, from the wedding to the accusation, the way my family had abandoned me, the 2 months of hell, everything. I cried in front of her, which was something I hadn't done with anyone since I left town, and I expected her to tell me it was too much drama, that she couldn't deal with this. But Megan just hugged me, let me cry on her shoulder, and when I finished telling everything, she looked at me and said, "That's completely horrible, and those people are assholes for not believing you." She didn't judge me, didn't question my version. She simply believed me, and that was it. That night we stayed up until 4 inches the morning talking about everything, and when I finally fell asleep on the couch with my head in her lap, I felt like maybe I could be happy again. Megan and Stephanie eventually met. In a kind of random way, actually. Turns out they were both obsessed with the same true crime podcasts, the murder and mystery ones, and they found each other in some Facebook group about that. When Stephanie saw Megan's last name and her photo, she sent a message asking if she was Isaac's girlfriend, and that's how they started talking. Now they're friends, which is kind of weird, but also great because Megan understands what Stephanie went through, and vice versa. Stephanie also remade her life in Chicago. By the way, she met a guy named Ethan in 2022. He works in software development too, like me, and according to her, he's the love of her life. They live together in a loft in North Chicago. They have a cat named Steve. Don't ask, Stephanie's always been weird with names, and they're engaged. I'm really happy for her, truly. Because of everyone who suffered through that nightmare, she got the worst part, and she deserves to be happy. All this is context to get to what happened about a month ago, because that's where this story really gets intense. It was a Saturday afternoon, October 2024. I was at my apartment cleaning because Megan was coming over that night, and I wanted the place not to look like a teenager lived there. I was vacuuming when I heard knocking at the door, which was weird because I wasn't expecting anyone and my building has a doorman so people can't just come up without notice. I opened the door, and there was Dylan, my cousin Dylan, who I hadn't seen in 5 years, standing in the hallway of my building in Seattle, looking older and tired, and like he hadn't slept in days. I froze, literally couldn't move a muscle. And he just said, "Isaac, I need to talk to you, please." My first reaction was to slam the door in his face. I mean, what did he expect? That I'd invite him for coffee after what he did? But there was something in his expression, I don't know, desperation maybe, that made me not close the door immediately. I asked him how the hell he'd found me, because I hadn't given my address to anyone in my family, and he said he'd hired a private investigator. A fucking private investigator to find me after 5 years of total silence. He asked if he could come in, that he had to tell me something important, and I honestly don't know why I let him in. Maybe curiosity. Maybe part of me wanted to hear what he had to say after so long. Dylan came in and stood in my living room, looking around like processing where he was, and then turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, Isaac. God, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. It was all a lie." And I just thought, really? That's what you come to say after 5 years? After destroying my life, allowing the whole family to treat me like trash, not defending me a single time? I told him to leave, that I didn't care about his apology, but he stood there telling me I needed to hear the truth, that he'd just discovered what really happened. Turns out the person who told Dylan about the supposed affair was a woman named Sandra, who went to the same gym as him. Apparently, Sandra had been flirting with Dylan for months, but he'd never paid attention to her because he was completely in love with Stephanie. Sandra invented the whole affair story because she thought that if she destroyed the relationship between Dylan and Stephanie, she could have a chance with him. She told him she'd seen Stephanie and me coming out of a hotel together, that we'd been sending romantic messages to each other, a whole completely fabricated narrative. And you know what's the most incredible thing? That Dylan believed her without asking for any proof, without seeing a single message, a single photo, nothing. Just the word of a woman who clearly had an interest in him. And when Sandra saw that her plan had worked and the wedding had been canceled, she tried to get close to Dylan offering comfort, but he was so devastated that he basically locked himself away for months. Eventually, Sandra got tired of waiting and moved to another city. And Dylan never knew the truth until about 2 months ago. How did he find out? Because Sandra confessed everything to a mutual friend while drunk at a bar, and that friend, who apparently had some conscience, told Dylan what Sandra had done. Dylan confronted her. She eventually admitted that yes, she'd lied about everything, that she was jealous and wanted to destroy his relationship. And Dylan there, standing in my living room, was telling me all this like he expected me to say, "Okay, all is forgiven, let's move on." I asked him why he hadn't believed me at that moment, why he'd preferred to believe a stranger over his cousin who he'd grown up with his whole life. He told me he was in a panic, that Sandra's story had many specific details that sounded believable, that his own parents told him where there's smoke, there's fire. I tried to explain to him that that was exactly the problem, that everyone had condemned me without evidence, based only on gossip. But he kept insisting he was sorry, that he was devastated by what he'd done to me. I told him to leave, and to tell the whole family to leave me alone, that I'd built a new life here and didn't want to know anything about any of them, that his apology came 5 years too late, and that no amount of "I'm sorry" was going to erase what they did to me. Dylan left, but before he left me his number in case I changed my mind, and I threw the paper in the trash as soon as I closed the door. After that, the messages started. My mom, my dad, Ryan, Lauren, everyone started writing me messages saying they'd heard the truth, that they were devastated to know they'd misjudged me, to please forgive them. My mom called me crying, saying she needed to see me, that she couldn't live without her son, and I just hung up. Lauren sent me like 10 messages in a row, saying she was the worst sister in the world, that she loved me, to please give her a chance. Ryan was the only one who had the decency to admit he'd been a coward for not defending me. But still, what good did that do now? I talked to Stephanie about all this, obviously, and she was in the same situation. Her parents had also tried to contact her. Her mom showed up at her work in Chicago, literally begging her to give her another chance, saying they'd been too hard on her and that God had forgiven her so she should forgive them too. Stephanie told them the same thing as me, that it was too late, that the damage was done. Megan helped me process all this. She was furious with my family, more furious than me even, and constantly reminded me that I didn't owe them anything, that the fact that they now knew the truth didn't change what they'd done to me. She asked me what I wanted to do, if I wanted to talk to them, and I honestly didn't know. Part of me wanted to scream at them everything I'd felt these 5 years, and another part just wanted to continue with my life and pretend they didn't exist. Stephanie and I eventually decided we wanted to have a final confrontation, but on our terms. We told Dylan to organize a meeting with everyone involved, both families, and that Sandra also had to be there to admit what she'd done in front of everyone. Stephanie flew from Chicago. I drove the 4 hours back to that town I'd sworn never to see again, and Megan insisted on coming with me for moral support. Ethan came with Stephanie for the same reason. The meeting was in November, at my parents' house, which was ironic because it was the same house where we'd had 1,000 family dinners. Everyone was there when we arrived. Dylan, Stephanie and me, Megan and Ethan, my parents, Ryan and Lauren, Stephanie's parents, Connor, and Sandra. Sandra looked uncomfortable, obviously, because she was going to have to admit in front of everyone that she'd destroyed lives out of jealousy. Sandra confessed everything, crying and apologizing, saying she was obsessed with Dylan and never thought things would go so far, that she just wanted to break them up, but didn't anticipate that both families would react so extremely, as if that made things better. You know what I mean? My dad stood up and started giving a speech about how family is the most important thing, about second chances, about how we all make mistakes. And that's where Stephanie interrupted him. She told him no, that this wasn't a simple mistake, that they had chosen to believe a stranger over their own daughter, that they'd thrown her out on the street like she was trash, that they hadn't questioned anything before destroying her life, that the fact that they now knew the truth didn't erase the fact that their love was completely conditional. I added that they were right, that if they'd really loved us, they would have given us the benefit of the doubt. They would have listened to us, would have asked for proof before condemning us. That I spent 2 months in that town being treated like a criminal while they didn't lift a finger to defend me. That I left here feeling completely alone in the world because the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally abandoned me at the moment I needed them most. My mom was crying, saying they never wanted to hurt us, that they were just confused and acted on impulse. Lauren said she was young and stupid and had followed what everyone else was doing. Ryan admitted he knew it probably wasn't true, but didn't want to go against the family. And all I could think was, is that supposed to make me feel better? I told them I didn't want their money, didn't want them to try to compensate me. I just wanted them to know they'd lost the right to be my family the day they decided I was guilty without proof. That Megan had been more family to me in 3 years than they had in my entire life, because she had believed me when nobody else did. Stephanie said the same thing about Ethan, that he had accepted her completely when her own parents had kicked her out. The meeting ended without any real resolution. Nobody hugged, nobody cried together. It wasn't like those movies where everyone forgives each other and moves on. Stephanie and I left, with Megan and Ethan, and drove back to our respective cities feeling a bit of closure, but also a lot of sadness for everything that had been lost. Megan and I are still together, obviously, and things are better than ever, actually. I'm planning to propose to her in March. I already have the ring and everything, and I think she's going to say yes. Stephanie and Ethan are getting married next summer in a small ceremony in Chicago, just close friends and Stephanie's cousin who helped her when she moved. Neither Dylan nor our families are invited. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if none of this had happened, if I'd stayed in that town, if my family had believed me. But then I look at my life now, and I realize that maybe everything happened for a reason. I met Megan. I have a career I love. I live in an amazing city, and I have peace of mind knowing that the people in my life now chose me, not because they share my blood, but because they genuinely want to be with me. Does it still hurt? Of course. There are days when I think about my mom, or Lauren, and I feel that hole in my chest of what could have been. But I also know I can't forgive something, just because they now know I was right. The damage was done, and no amount of apologies is going to change the 5 years I spent feeling worthless, feeling I didn't deserve to be loved. Last week, Megan asked me if I'd ever consider giving my family another chance, and I told her honestly I don't know. That maybe in the future, when I have my own kids and want them to know their grandparents, but right now I'm not ready. And she just nodded, kissed me on the forehead, and said that whatever I decided, she'd support me. And that, I guess, is what it really means to love someone, to believe them unconditionally, even when the whole world says otherwise.